I share my screen? Okay. Let me see. Okay. Hello, everyone. I noticed that the title of this this talk was actually, I think, about project delivery. Well, this is somewhat similar to project delivery, but I think that title was taken from an article that I wrote, and yeah, but I'm actually presenting on my current research right now, which is almost a continuation of that particular article and other articles which I will share at the end of this particular presentation. But for my presentation today, I will be talking about an integrated supply chain model for collaborative working in the South African construction industry. So my name, as Kondo mentioned, my name is Zanele, and Zanele Matsane, and my promoters, you might know one of them because he's your dean, and that's Prof. Anumba, and then there's Prof. Albaboa. I had the pleasure of meeting Prof. Anumba last year when I came to University of Florida, and after having a lot of meetings with him, I was very happy to hear that he was willing to become my other promoter for my PhD. So in this presentation, we're going to address who am I, just a few questions. Why are you listening to me? What is the problem? How should we solve the problem? Why should you care about the problem or the solution? How do I fit in? And how far am I in solving this problem? What do I hope to achieve? And then at the end, just have some questions and suggestions. If you have any questions or any suggestions, because this is an ongoing research, it's part of my PhD study. So if you have any questions, I'll really appreciate that. Any suggestions, I really appreciate that as well. So who am I? So again, I'm Zanele. Some people call me Zan. Yeah, I'm a lecturer. I know in the States they call professors. I'm a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg here in South Africa. I work for the Department of Construction Management and Quantity Surveying in the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment. I am currently a third-year PhD student in engineering management. I'm very passionate about construction people, construction education, and supply chain management. I've worked in the industry. I worked as a quantity surveyor, then I worked as a construction manager, because in South Africa, they still distinguish the two. So I've been I've worked for 4 years in between my studies from the first time I was in undergrad to now being in postgrad as well. So why are you listening to me? When we talk about supply chain management, it's not a word that's very foreign to us. I'm sure we've all heard something about supply chain management. But when it came out in 1980s and 1960s, 1980s, supply chain management had one goal, and that was to improve customer service without increasing inventory costs. And that was the primary goal. And if you go back to the literature, when you read about it, that's the whole point, that people were very much interested in the supply chain management. And so it's only natural that in construction we also become very interested in it. There has been some interest over the years in construction, and particularly in South Africa, we haven't really researched it or applied it too much or studied it too much within construction. And so the reason why I'm presenting this is I'm presenting supply chain management, and I'm trying to fuse it with construction. And why do I want to do that? Because the South African construction industry is the biggest, our biggest client in South Africa is the state. All right, it's the government. And because they're our biggest client, they're in charge, they have more projects in infrastructure and construction and building. They they have a lot of problems. And so my research is to try to use supply chain management to improve one of the country's biggest economy player. So manufacturing is doing well, retail is doing well, but construction is not doing well in South Africa. And I think just in general, all over the country, all over the world, construction tends to lag behind. But within South Africa, it's really struggling. And so my research comes into that the same way, the same goal that they had when they brought up supply chain management back in the 60s or the 80s. I have the goal for me is to improve customer service, and that is customers, our client, without ever having to increase the costs of construction, because people always want solution without having to pay too much for that solution. So ultimately, I'm trying to combine supply chain management with construction to create construction supply chain management. And that's why I'm giving this talk today. So what is the problem, you may ask? Well, the understanding of supply chain management is as difficult as is as difficult, fragmented as the construction industry. I found it quite funny when I was, as I was doing my research, that it's so funny that as much as these two terms or these two fields are so prominent and are well respected, the understanding of it is so difficult and so scattered that they
I think we're having some technical problems. Okay, I think she's going to try and re-enter the Zoom. So okay, she's confirmed that she's having some technical issues, so she's gonna log right back in. Thank you everybody for your patience.
all right. Sorry, in South Africa, our connections just disappear.
It's okay, we understand.
So where did I get cut off?
You were talking about how fragmented the supply chain management is right now.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I'm actually still on the page. So I'm just gonna try to get a direct connection. My husband's gonna try to connect me directly, and so I just saw my camera just disappear. So I'm sorry, everyone.
It's okay. It's not just a South African thing. It happens everywhere.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, I was worried now.
Hey, Kwando, did this presenter happen to share with you a provisional copy of their presentation?
The PowerPoint, no.
Okay.
Yeah. But she says she's trying to get on a direct line. I'm not sure what that means, but I think it's a way to fix the problem. I hope we won't have this going on, and I will ask her to send us a PowerPoint just so we can keep going if it happens again.
Sure, that makes sense.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think I'm back now. And I think this time I won't leave you guys.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
All right, let me just go ahead. Okay, so as I was saying that there's so many definitions for supply chain management, and it's quite surprising for a concept that's been around since the 60s, or at least in terms of literature, it has been around since the 80s. There's always a definition. That some of the definitions are the same, some of the definitions are different, even when they're within the same industry or the same in the same academic field. Even till this day, we still seeing new definitions. So there's a big problem with the definition. There's always elusive definition, or everything else has a definition that everyone has accepted generally, and that doesn't seem to be the case within supply chain management. Another issue is that we lack theoretical frameworks, and we lack theoretical frameworks in how we apply it and how we practice it. Though when you do find theoretical frameworks, you find theoretical frameworks that help you sort through the chaos, as one author said. So you are sorting through the literature of supply chain, and hence they created theoretical framework for that, but not for practice. We also don't have models. As much as everyone is writing about supply chain management, we don't have models. We don't have models that we can actually put into practice as well. And the models that do exist, that we do find, are practitioner-led models. And that's the other part that's very concerning, because it's a supply chain management is a concept that's led by the industries instead of academia in terms of research. And there's also this big confusion between supply chain management and management of the supply chain. That those two are not the same. So when you look at literature, you mostly find managing or management of the supply chain, as opposed to finding supply chain management. And we know that management of the supply chain is only one portion of the supply chain management model. And when we do look at supply chain management as well, it's mostly borrowed from manufacturing. You can find it in retail, in hospitality, but most of it, especially within engineering, when we study or when we read literature on supply chain management, it's borrowed from manufacturing. And of course, many people might argue that, okay, that's also fine because construction is a form of manufacturing. That is true to some degree, and also the Egan report, and by extension, even the Latham report, also suggested that for construction to progress and for construction to match up and be as progressive as manufacturing, we have to copy from manufacturing. And I guess that's the reason why most of the literature that we find in supply chain management is talking about the concept from the manufacturing perspective. But we know there's a big difference between manufacturing and construction. There's, as opposed to having a production or assembly line, we have multiple people, multiple players working on a product, on a stationary product. All right, that's construction. It's the we don't have, unless, yes, we're talking about standardization and building components and prefabrication and that sort. But generally speaking, for example, if you were to build a road, as one professor said, it's very difficult for us to build a road in a factory and then, you know, put it on the ground and start assembling it there. It will be very, very difficult. And so the most part of it is that construction is a completely different form of manufacturing from supply chain management. But when you look at the literature, you mostly find that they talk about manufacturing more than they speak about any other industry. And so those are the issues within the supply chain management field. Within the construction industry, we have what we know for a fact that everything is temporary. All the projects are construction is temporary compared to manufacturing, for example. It is project-based. There is free entry. As long as you have money, it's the saying we like to say in South Africa, a hairdresser can join construction in South Africa. You know, a hairdresser can become a contractor as long as they have enough money, you know, to join the industry. So we have free entry. Anybody from anywhere can join the construction industry, which is different from other fields. If you look at accounting, you look at medicine or health, you can't just join it just because you have money. In South Africa, in construction industry, especially in South Africa, anybody can join. And because of that, we have very difficult relationships, working relationships with people within the industry. Our industry is very wasteful. I know even in South Africa, it's very wasteful. It's wasteful during production. It's wasteful in the sense also, especially when we look at the state being the client, that they might build a project and never use it. All right, so we might build a building or a certain infrastructure and the government might just abandon it and not use it afterwards as well. And there's, again, a big difference between the construction industry and manufacturing is that there's a big separation between design and production. And yes, we could argue that certain forms of contract agreements or procurement systems do cater to that, but even with those particular systems like the construction management procurement systems, we still see a big separation between design and production. And then we have lots of delays. It's well known. I mean, whenever I teach my students, I try not to say it, but more often than not, you have to plan for a delay within construction. Of course, the normal delay, the rain and all those weather delays, we understand those, but delays most of the delays within constructions are man-made as well. So how do we solve this problem? I don't want to spend too much time talking about the problems that we have, because I think we can spend the whole year talking about the problems we have in construction. So how should we solve this problem? Well, there needs to be a supply chain model, management model that is aimed at collaborative working in the construction industry. And to this part, I do agree with the Egan report and the Latham report, where we're no longer only looking at procurement. We are no longer looking only at contractual agreements. We are just looking at a system where everybody was collaboratively, irrespective of the procurement system that was used for that particular project. So how do we do it? Because you can read literature. I mean, you can go on, the search engines, and you can go on journal articles and conference papers. And everyone is always talking about how we have supply chain management in construction. It exists. But it's, as one author put it, it's more of a lip service. All right. And I'll give you an example. It's the same thing that we have in South Africa, where right now we have researchers who are writing about building information modeling and how it can help our industry in South Africa. But to date, there is no construction that takes place using that particular system, the building information modeling. We don't use it in South Africa. We are not educated in it, and we are still only learning about it and how it should work. But you'll be amazed at how much literature we have on building information modeling. And of course, we know that industry takes longer than academia to accept change, but it's the same thing with supply chain management. And the frustrating thing about supply chain management in construction is that people have been writing about it for years and years, but we still haven't seen anything, come up, even if it's within academia, to show us if we were to apply it, how would we actually do it? So the question now is, how do we do it? How do we actually accomplish it now? And as I'm doing the study, I realized that we have to go back to the first 11 years when supply chain management literature came about. The first 11 years, that is from 1980. All right, until 1996, if not 1993. There was a lot of literature, and the reason why I make the argument that we should go back to the first 11 years is there seemed to be a lot of unity in academia or in research during those 11 years that has been lacking for the past, since 1997. The literature from 1997 to our current time right now, there's a lot of disharmony on supply chain management, whereas when you look at the first 11 years, it's almost as if it was a relay, a race, for example. So one author would write and hand over the baton to the next, and the next would hand on to the next. And that is, and by doing so, you can actually understand what were these authors trying to do, what were they trying to accomplish with regards to this particular concept. And one thing that I noticed, for example, with those first 11 years, is the fact that all the information was always built up. They built up from the previous work that they had done. No one ventured out and went other places. Whereas within our time now, everyone is just mentioning supply chain management, as I said, confusing SCM with managing the supply chain as well. We need to acknowledge the difference and relevance of SCM approaches in other fields, because in those first 11 years of supply chain management, we realized that those authors were not writing this particular work based on a particular industry. Their hope was, we are creating this blueprint, we are creating this foundation, and we want to know in the next years to come, whoever takes over from us, we want to know how can it be applied and how is it applied in your industry. All right, so it wasn't that when they first came up with it, yes, mostly of them came from manufacturing, but most of them also didn't come from manufacturing. And they do say that we created this particular concept, and we see that it's working in manufacturing in such and such a field, but we want to make sure, we want to know in the future, how does it apply in your field? And when now you look at that statement, construction is the only field that hasn't taken that approach, that didn't take that foundation from those first 11 years and created their own understanding of supply chain management. Instead, we waited for a very long time. Manufacturing got in, manufacturing got it right. And after manufacturing got it right, and in 1998, the Egan report came out, and then we were told, let's follow manufacturing, all right? And of course, I understand that the Egan report wasn't saying that we should follow manufacturing as copying how the actual production took place, but we should copy those principles, and I agree with that. We have to copy the principles that come from manufacturing and the guidelines that they've created for themselves. But that doesn't mean manufacturing should be our foundation. We should also follow suit as manufacturing did and go back to those first 11 years as well. We need to create a model that is people orientated and embedded in leadership. And the reason why I say this is because when you look at supply chain modeling in different fields, it has more to do with production and distribution, all right? And within supply chain management in construction, within construction, our distribution is somewhat different, and our production as well is somewhat different because our production is people orientated. We have people working on one stationary project, a product, and you know, after different people working on it, and after they are done with their part, they leave the product where they found it, for example. So it's one particular CEO who once said that when supply chain started, it had to do with machinery, inventory, information sharing, marketing, and those sort of things. And that was supply chain management when it started. But right now, when you look at it in our day, it has to be geared towards people. It has to be geared towards leadership. And that is something that we need a lot within construction. And that's why I say it's not a waste for us to look at supply chain management. We just have to know how to look at it as well. So this is how, for example, after those first 11 years, this is the summary of what they came up with when they spoke of the conceptual framework for supply chain management. You had to look at supply chain structure. You had to look at management components and business practices, and you had to look at them collectively to create supply chain management. And so some industries, depending on what the industry is, they only needed to look at supply chain structure, and some needed only to look at business processes, some needed to look at management components. But what I'm seeing within construction is we might have to look at supply chain. If we were to look at supply chain management, we have to look at all of those three elements together, as opposed to only picking one part. And that is what we see in current literature. Current literature only tells us about supply chain structure. So whenever you read about it in engineering, in construction, and you read about supply chain management, they're actually talking about the supply chain structure. And what they talk about in the supply chain, they're only talking about the contractor, those who work under him as well. So that's also limited as well. So what I'm trying to do now is to trying to look at all of these three elements and try to apply them within construction, still using other industries in aiding, knowing what do you pick, what can I pick, what can I choose, what can I discard that is not applicable for this particular industry. So why should we care about the problem?
Sorry, Zanele. Would you be able to share your screen, please?
Oh, sorry. Have I not been sharing it?
No.
Oh, sorry. All right. Let me just share it quickly. No, I forgot to share the screen. Okay, thank you. I think it's shared, right? Okay, so I'll just take it from here because I think we didn't see this part. So it's just coming up. So this is what I meant when I talked about the elements of the construction supply chain framework. So these authors of the first 11 years, by 1997, after studying the literature from the first 11 years, this is what they came up with and said, if we are to look at supply chain management, we are to look at supply chain structure, business processes, and management components all together collectively. We can't look at it in silos, which is happening now. And I understand that in some industry, like I say, some industries only need to look at one aspect. But if you're looking at one element, then you technically should not be calling it supply chain management. It's just, and what I've seen from my research is what I'm working on is how do we create, how do we apply these elements in our model, in developing a model for our industry in construction as well. And also moving away, because like I said, literature right now, when it talks about supply chain structure, we normally only focus on that. If you, I promise you, if you just go and look at literature in terms of supply chain management in construction or in engineering, for example, you will see that when they will have supply chain management in the title, and then they'll go on to talk about management of the supply chain, which, like I said, is not the same thing. And they normally focus on the suppliers, they focus on the contractor suppliers. And the reason why they do this, again, is because this concept, they borrowed it from manufacturing. And if you look at manufacturing, when you talk about the supply chain structure, they are talking about the suppliers, all right, the distributors and those who own warehouses. But it's different for us in our industry, because even the professional team, the professionals, the client, the engineers and the construction managers, all of them form part of our supply chain in construction. And our supply chain has to do more with service than actual production. All right, as much as because we all are involved in production. Of course, the contractor takes the lead in actual production, but when it comes to the supply chain within construction, we can't just isolate and remove the architect or the construction manager and say we are looking at supply chain management as well. So why should we care about the problem or the solution? Mind my spelling, I can't believe I actually spelled it wrong. So the problems we have in the South African construction industry, I will look at that because my work is mostly based in the South African industry. But I think it's a big problem that we're facing everywhere in the world. But within South Africa, we have poor performance, very, very poor performance of construction. Our construction industry is not performing very well. Every single year when the statistics come out, there's always a problem. We are always dropping. The numbers are always dropping within construction. And because we have such poor performance, we are suffering now during this pandemic. And that's a big problem. And why is it a big problem? Is South Africa has a high rate of unemployment. So we have a lot of people who are unemployed, and I'm not talking only about the people who have qualification. We have a high rate of uneducated people, unskilled people who are unemployed. And construction in South Africa is known to employ those people who don't have qualifications. It's known to employ them. It's actually the biggest employer of unskilled labor in South Africa. So you can see that there's a lot hanging on on the construction industry in South Africa. There's a lot of people who depend on it, not just our economy. And so we need to make sure that we increase its performance, we improve its performance for it to actually fit this particular skill, because our unemployment has gone up. I think now it's at 40, if not about 40%. And that's very alarming as well. And the reason why are we looking towards supply chain management? We're looking towards supply chain management because it reduces complexity. And we know construction is complex, all right? So supply chain management gives us the opportunity to reduce those complexities. It gives us an opportunity to fix the challenges that vulnerable companies face. One thing we have noticed in South Africa is there is no company that is safe within the construction industry, even those well-established companies. Companies that were leading the pack when I was an undergrad, they're no more to be found right now. They've merged, they've been liquidated. So it's quite surprising that even very highly established companies that have had projects overseas as well, they are very vulnerable within this particular industry. And supply chain management can actually help fix that problem. It also helps manage functional objectives that we have. We have functional objectives, and manage the control systems. You know, we talk a lot about control. I lecture construction management to my third and second years. And we talk a lot about control systems, and supply chain management can actually help in that regard as well. So ultimately, the international chains of construction can be unified as it has been in its challenges. The same way that we all have issues with construction all over the world, and we've been united, you know, with those particular issues. Again, if you read literature, there's always a sentence in every journal paper that says, construction is fragmented, construction is temporary, there's difficult relationships. So we've been united in those challenges, and if we implement supply chain management, we'll be united in the benefits of construction management, even though my study is based on the South African industry as well. So the question now is, how do I fit in? Like I said, for my title, I'm trying to create a practice-ready supply chain model for the construction industry. And I know the question would be, don't we have one already? We actually do not have. We have modeling of the supply chain. And like I said, the supply chain is just a fraction, if you remember that model. It's only just one element of the entire concept as well. And one particular model that I can refer to that exists is the one by Love et al. I think it was, they did it in 2004. But that particular, what I found interesting about that particular model is that number one, it seemed very rushed. Yes, they were trying to create a holistic supply chain management model. But if we read the recommendations and the conclusion, they tell you that it has never been tested. It is, and how they came about creating that model is they asked 3 professional, I think it's probably less than 10, but I think they said they asked 3 professional people in the industry how we should create a supply chain model. So what is quite interesting about that, when you look at that model, you realize what we have not achieved in our time. And I'm not bashing those particular authors. What they did was great. What is alarming is that no one followed up. No one read that paper and said, okay, let me try it. Okay, let me create something. What we see now when we look at research within construction and we look at supply chain management, we see questions like, is supply chain management, does it make sense in construction? And I remember I read one thesis that the whole thesis was about sense making of supply chain in construction. And at the end, the author said, supply chain management doesn't make sense in construction. And that's where he left it as well. So my goal is to create a practice-ready supply chain model. I don't want to say we can't do it or it cannot be done without trying as well. And so I want, if I cannot create one that can work, I want a construction industry specific understanding of supply chain management. If I can't create the model, at least let's go with finding a specific understanding of supply chain management in construction. And after that, I also want to validate whether the conceptualized model whether it's practical by using South Africa as a case study. All right. So like I said, the one model that existed, it hadn't been tested. It asked for further research to test it and nothing took place. So I'm trying to do this and say, I will also try to create a conceptualized model and I will test it by using South Africa as a case study as well. I want to have a holistic view of construction supply chain management from the original development of supply chain management, and that is the first 11 years. I want to almost as if to a certain extent think or approach this as if we are only on the 12th year of supply chain management in existence and see what would we do, but at the same time, apply the knowledge, the technology that has come about in our time in 2020. So how far am I in solving this problem? Well, not so far at all. I have 5 objectives and I've only completed 1 so far. And that is what I'm presenting to you. I'm not going to read this whole sentence. I'm sure we can all read them, but as I was saying, I'm trying to review the application of supply chain management in other industries and to identify their best practice, the critical factors. I also just won't say manufacturing can help us or retail can help us. They can help us to a certain extent, and we have to look at that in order to see some benefits for ourselves within the industry as well. And so I have 4 more objectives to go. So I've done 1, I've answered and completed 1. I have 4 more objectives to go, and I'm hoping that it goes faster than I did with the first one. So what do I hope to achieve? When you read the paper by Cooper et al. In 1997, they ask a lot of questions. And I hope to achieve, to some degree, I would love to answer these questions, and these questions that I see that maybe even within literature, we haven't answered it. Like, what are the relevant supply chain processes? And are they the same for all companies or industries? What is the most appropriate form of the supply chain as well? What is the intra and inter-organizational scope of processes? How far up and downstream should they extend? And should all processes cut across the whole supply chain from dirt to dirt, or do different processes follow different links? What metrics should be used to evaluate performance of an entire supply chain? And my favorite one is supply chain management the best term for this integrated management form? And I like that one of my promoters, Prof. Number once told me that by the time that you're done with your study, we might have to change the name, right? So I think it goes back to this question that was posed, that do we still stick to the term SCM, or do we find another term for this integrated management approach? So I'm expecting that maybe by the time I'm done with the rest of the other 4 objectives, that perhaps I might have to change my entire title and create or come up with another word that will better suit this particular work that I'm doing, because as this author stated that this term supply chain management was first proposed in 1982, and 1982 means it's 38 years old. So are we still going with it? Is it time to come up with something else as well? But ultimately what I hope to achieve is, again, to just create construction supply chain management understanding. So how am I doing? I just decided to do this. For those of you also doing a PhD, I don't know how it's going on your side, but this is just a little joke graph of what's going on in my life. From OMG, I'm getting my PhD, to oh my, what was I thinking? I think most of the time, if you can see the graph, it has dipped a lot. I think I've only started coming up and feeling a bit more excited again after my meeting with my second meeting. Well, we have a lot of them, but the milestone meetings that I had with my promoters in September, and I'm feeling, oh my goodness, this is it. I can do it. And also with this particular presentation, it's actually very nice to present to people who are not my promoters, or to present to people who I can just speak about the whole, the passion that I have for supply chain management, as opposed to speaking about, speaking academically as we all do, and with a whole lot of sentences and those stuff. But this is currently my graph. I wonder how it will look by the time that I'm done, but I doubt that I actually reached that peak that I started with when I applied for it. It was quite fun when I applied. And then everything just dipped. For example, if you look at when I had problems with my promoter, and then when I visited UF, it was just there. It started increasing a bit when I visited UF as well. So it was very nice to be at UF. You guys are very privileged to be studying there. I wish I knew about UF a long time ago. Yeah, and then also I started a new job. So I work full-time and I study full-time. So So please don't judge me that I'm in my third year of my PhD and I've only done one of my 5 objectives because I literally have a full-time job. And I got married in between this whole thing. And I think that's why it also dipped a bit. But again, thank you a lot for you guys attending as well. I think this presentation has again boosted my confidence to continue. These are the references that I use for this work. And yes, and this, if you have any questions and suggestions, we can discuss them now. That's my WhatsApp number. If you ever want to contact me, if you want to collaborate, I'd love to collaborate with you guys in what you're doing, if you're ever interested in that. And my email addresses, they are there. You can email me, we can discuss. It will be fun. It's very encouraging. We don't have this sort of community within the South African context, and that's why we don't have a lot of South Africans with PhDs. So I really appreciate being invited to this platform as well. And that's, for example, these are the papers that I've written. If you want to just follow the journey of how I got to this point of studying construction supply chain, especially in my PhD, I think these articles cover it a lot, why I went through it. Because initially in my master's, I was just simply looking at collaborative working. But by the time that I was done, it was a qualitative study, which is hardly done in construction and engineering. Everyone prefers the quantitative side. So we learned a lot through the qualitative method, especially the interviews that we conducted as well. So it was quite informative, and we realized that we were missing a lot of things. So this is just a journey. If you just want to read up on it, you can. If you want to have the article, I think I can share it with you guys. If you want the article that was meant to be this particular presentation, I can share it with Kwando, and Kwando can share it with all of you as well. But yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zanele. That was great. I'm gonna open up the floor for questions. We have about 10 minutes left. So anybody who has questions, comments, I see comments about, I haven't seen questions yet. Kofi said something about your collaboration with Dr. Titus Kofi.
Yes, yeah. I met him during my master's. So I did my master's. I wrote it because I was in a different university. I was not at the University of Johannesburg, so I met him. I had written my master's because I did my master's very quickly. I was very stressed because I had a full-time teaching job as well. So I remember my promoter, my supervisor, actually gave Dr. Titus my master's, and Dr. Titus came up with all these ideas of papers we could write. Unfortunately, I couldn't write all of them, but at least, yeah, he was very encouraging in that. And at least that was the first time I was actually encouraged to believe that my master's was actually pretty good, because at first I thought I'd wasted all my time, but he really helped encourage me in that point.
Well, that's great. Does anybody else have any questions? I mean, I know that especially at DCP grad level, there's a lot of diversity as far as, global locations. There's people from all over the world, even in this presentation. So it's great to hear a perspective that is not US centric either.
I actually didn't want to present because I know in the US you guys are into AI and robotics. I kind of feel like I'm like doing
interestingly enough.
Kwando, I've got a question.
Kofi, please go ahead.
Yes, my question has got to do with the validation, and you mentioned validation of the model you are going to create as a very key step in making it acceptable globally. Now, how do you intend to do this using the South African context as your, should I say, your testing field? Yeah.
Well, the two processes that I'm going to use. Well, to create the model, I'm trying to create the model. I will use the literature to influence how the concept should be. But what I'm going to do after the concept, after having the concept of what it should be, I'm going to go into the industry, into construction projects. So I'm going to go to a number of construction projects in the majority of South Africa, you know, to inquire. The world, my promoter is looking towards the questionnaire type of system, the Delphi study, but I'm trying to go the system dynamics route. So for me, what I learned from my master's was you learn a lot from asking people, you know, what's going on. And not just the construction managers, not just the professionals, but even the foreman, you know, the foreman that is supervising brickwork and all those stuff. So first, I'm going to go through that. I'm going to go through that extensive work of allowing them to help me create this particular model or this concept of the model, which while it being backed by the literature. And once I've done that and I analyze those results and I input them to create through the system dynamics route to create this particular model, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it back to those people that I had inquired from. Not just them, maybe perhaps I'll go back to them or I'll go back to somebody else. But I'm going to take it back to them and said, after we spoke, this is what I came up with, and now I want you guys to tell me if this is it and what in it works, what doesn't work. And again, it could part of it will be a mixed method. So part of it will be surveys, but another part of it will actually still come up as questions or interviews as well. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve there.
Thank you very much. And then my second question has to do with, I heard you mention the Latham report sometime during your presentation.
Yes.
Comparing the dynamics of the UK, where the Latham report was written, to South Africa, what are the common issues? Because I think that a lot of these things, the generalization of your findings will benefit if there are a lot of common issues that you can draw. Yeah. So what are some of the common issues?
Essentially, because we always say South Africa is almost similar to the UK in the sense that we were colonized by the British. So most of how we do our systems, our constructions, our procurement, even our contractual agreements are taken from the UK industry. So the issues that we have in terms of adversarial relationships, health and safety, we talk about, you know, a mismatch of contractual agreements with the projects that we face, and like the delays, the cost overruns, the poor performance or poor quality in structures. Those are the issues that we face with the UK, and those are the ones that we've always shared with the UK, not just the UK. Even with Australia, for example, we've had those same issues with them, with the industry as well. So it's the same problem, and I think the latest one was building faster. You know, the biggest problem now with building faster is the health and safety of our people who are working on the site. So, but we're building faster because we're planning slower. So we're very slow in our planning. That's one other thing that we struggle with the UK as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
I have several questions, if I may.
Okay.
One question I was hoping to have answered is you mentioned, I believe, that there's a difference between supply chain management and managing the supply chain. And then you ended by saying that you were going to likely have to coin a new term. So not that you have to have done that already, but if you're saying there's a difference between supply chain management and managing the supply chain, could you just simply reiterate that difference that you're trying to identify?
Okay, so when we talk about management of the supply chain, so we're talking about, for example, managing, let's say we are just managing our suppliers and our subcontractors, or the contractor as well. We are managing them, remember, because if we borrow from manufacturing, we call them our supply chain within construction. All right. So we are managing them, managing them to do the work, to do the work correctly and according to the design, according to budget, and so on and so forth. That is managing the supply chain. So you almost, if you work for the contractor, for example, and you're a construction manager on the side, essentially your job is to manage the supply chain that is involved in the construction of your building. Whereas supply chain management goes beyond just managing how work is done. It goes to putting in place business processes and management processes in place to, from the time that a client says, I want this to be done, we put in place business processes and management components. And also we also always have to define the supply chain. What is our supply chain right now, especially because within construction, our supply chain changes with every phase. We always taught the phases of construction. So the phase that our supply chain, it has to evolve as we move down, as we move every phase of construction. And in order to do that, in order to allow it to change and to evolve, we need business processes and we need management practices to help us do that. And that is what is supply chain management. Because what's happening is, if you read literature and if you ask people who conduct research, they will tell you that when they tell you, for example, about a problem in construction, they will say the quantity surveyors or the architects are saying the foremans don't work well, the supervisors don't do their job, and all the type of thing. So what they're saying is that the problem is just the supply chain, but whereas the problem is actually the entire system of how we work.
Yeah.
So
that's
sense. That's what I'm trying to look at. That let's not blame the foreman, because when you listen to the foreman, you realize that our problems actually come from higher up. The management aspect of it. They come from there. The problems, by the time they get to the foreman, they can't fix them. And they are forced to go ahead with the work.
Okay, thank you for that. Just a couple more questions.
Okay.
You mentioned that the government was effectively the biggest customer for the construction industry in South Africa.
Yeah.
And so I was curious as to, in the process of your studies, are you planning to involve whatever government entity would be responsible for initiating these projects in general, or government entities that had the power to make decisions whether or not to abandon a building that has already been constructed?
Yes, that is my goal. My goal, I kind of looked at it looking forward, like I asked myself, what do I want to do after my PhD? Should I get my PhD? But the reason I asked that is because we have the CIDB, the Construction Industry Development Board, and they are commissioned by government, by the parliament, to bring up regulation and legislation and processes and to implement within the industry, within our industry. So my goal, should this succeed, should I at least come to a point where I feel I've done something, my goal is therefore then to approach the Construction Development Board. And they're very welcoming, and they're always welcome to ideas, because their laws are not based on politics, they're mostly based on research. So if you can actually come up with research and come up with a concept and plan concept, they actually give you funds to implement it further, until to the point where they say, okay, we like it, we're going to take it and we're going to run with it. So that's my goal after my PhD, is to create a center for supply chain management in construction, and therefore attract those particular tenders from such bodies, to assist and to actually say, this is what I want our industry to look like. And it's very possible within South Africa, because that development board really appreciates research.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay,
Yeah.
and then just to truncate my list, I'll just ask a final question.
Okay.
It's not necessarily focused directly on your research, but you did mention that there's a kind of a lack of use of BIM in the industry in general. And so please correct me if I'm wrong, but it led me to believe that potentially there's not a lot of opportunities for potential practitioners to be trained in BIM or have access to the software. And so I was wondering, are you pursuing potentially any partnerships here at UF or in the States with people to train users in BIM and how to implement that for construction purposes, or maybe even supply chain management or comprehensive supply chain management?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
according
that's
to
a
your
good
research?
question. Yeah, that's a good question. And when I did come to the UF, it was quite amazing, because when I got there and we were told that there's a BIM class, and I was like, oh, there's a BIM class? Because it's something I'd never heard like before, that,
Sure.
And so when I attended that class, everyone was like, no, it's fine, you'll be fine. And I attended the class and I was lost and I didn't know a thing. And I was like, oh, so this is how BIM happens, and this is how they teach BIM. And in South Africa, we have, it's one of those things, when a new concept comes about, as researchers, to remain relevant, we tend to jump at something and we say, okay, I'm going to be the one who now researches BIM. And that has happened a lot within South Africa, where we've had people who ran and said, I understand BIM, I've heard it at a conference, and I've read papers on it. And what we have not done is, or those particular researchers have not done, is they have not moved to the extent to progress to the extent that the UF has, for example, progressed towards it, where you actually teach it in the classroom to your students. Because as much as, and when we do have workshops, I've attended many workshops where they tell us about BIM, and essentially they simply just tell us, but we don't know how it works, and we don't know how would we use it. So everyone is a bit reluctant to even try it out, because we don't know, is it a software? Do you buy the whole software? Where do you use it? And how do you have everyone join in to use it? Those are simple questions that I myself don't even know. And now I was amazed when I got to UF and students are taught it. So you can see the advancement that you guys have made compared to us. We can't teach it. The only thing we can tell our students is that there's BIM and this is what it does, I think, and according to our research. So there's a great opportunity, because South Africa has a lot of investors. We have a lot of international companies that come, and as much as we do have the government as our biggest client, we do have private companies. Like, I know I think the company was Mercedes, if I'm not mistaken, but there was a Mercedes plant that they had to build in South Africa. And the company said, we wanted to build it, using BIM. And so there was one particular firm that had dabbled a bit in it. They didn't know much, but because they had the word BIM in their company logo or something, they got that particular tender. So and when you ask them, I promise it's the most frustrating thing. I got to a point where I hated BIM because I didn't understand it, and everyone tells me what BIM is, but I don't know how it works. I still don't know how it works. And so we don't know it. And if I say, I know I sound like a traitor to my people here this side, but we honestly don't know it. So it was a shame that I was there for research when I got to UF, but I actually even wrote a proposal, and I said I'd do it after my PhD, to write a proposal to be allowed to go on a teaching scholarship to UF and actually study, with the students as well. So there's a big opportunity. I was telling Kwando this in the last time when she gave a talk with my students, that we have a great opportunity to explore here with Kwando, because her being Southern African as well. that should she decide that she's tired of the state, she can come back, and we can work at developing, when we're both done with our PhDs, we can work at developing a curriculum for BIM information modeling, and actually, introduce it within our university as well. And also create workshops. And I promise you, we would get a lot of tenders from government to do that. And even within our university, our vice chancellor is very keen on the fourth industrial revolution and so on and so forth. So I always told Kwanda that we have an amazing opportunity, but not just with Kwanda, with all of you guys. If you guys can come up with a curriculum, if you were to teach it, how would you teach it and where would you start? And you must remember, you have to start from back then, not where you are right now. Teach it to someone who doesn't even know that it exists. It would actually create a lot of opportunities within South Africa.
So that's something we can contact you using your contact information.
Yeah, I'd really like that. I think we should do that. It would really be wonderful, because it shocked me. I promise you, I almost cried when I attended that class, because they're all talking and they're all working on this thing, and I don't know what they're doing. I felt that was the first time I felt very stupid. I went away from that class after the recess. I was just like, I'm gone. I can't do this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So I'll just share my details again so that you guys can see my email address and my WhatsApp.
Yeah, you can go ahead and share that, or you can email it to me and I will
send
it to everybody. Okay. Thank you so much, Zanele. I'm sure there's more people who want to talk more, but in the interest of time, I think we should stop here. I absolutely think we should definitely pursue what you suggested we pursue, although I don't have to go home to do that. I mean, look at this.
So you don't want to come home, so you're never coming home.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's not a bottleneck anymore, being away.
Yeah, but you should come home, because I know normally the biggest problem is, when you go overseas and you've been gone for a while, and then you go do your PhD overseas, the country is very reluctant to take you back, because you were a trader, you left us, and those things. But I honestly believe if you want to impact our industry, especially because the built environment is really struggling even now. I see it a lot in our departments. I'll tell you, for example, in our department, we are two of us who are two female Black lecturers. And we are the most diverse in the 26 universities in South Africa. Just because we are two Black women, our department is the most diverse. So you can see that we still have a long way to go. Right. So if you do want to come back, they will definitely take you back. Just mention those words: AI, robotics, fourth industrial revolution, and they will take you.
Okay. Yeah, we'll chew this out privately. All right, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Please plan to join us again in the next research seminar, which will be in 2 weeks. Again, we should be able to share Zanele's information for anyone who wants to reach out and kind of get involved in developing supply chain management and BIM and anything else that your creativity might bring to.
Yeah, I really think if I understood BIM, or if I had someone who understood BIM, and then I understand supply chain management, we could come up with something. And because eventually our supply chain management model must involve technology. There's no way it can be improved without technology being incorporated. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So